Hello, everyone, and welcome into the crowded booth. We appreciate you tuning in as we get ready for another episode of Swarm Talk. Got to fix it here. There we go. We welcome you in to Swarm Talk, brought to you here by the crowded booth. And, it's been a minute, but we're getting ready to talk a little college football, a little bit of the spring portal cycle, some of my takeaways from the spring game, and just overall the kind of the status of the Georgia Tech program. Been a minute. So make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you tuning in here on a Thursday afternoon. It's lunchtime for a lot of you. Might have to start doing these a little bit more. Before we get started, I want to tell you about our good friends over at Section 103, more comfortable than the club seats. Look, they've got some of the best gear out there on the market if you're a Tech fan. You are really going to want to take advantage of everything they have going on. You can use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your first order today. I'm telling you, in a market where there's not a lot of great gear in terms of Georgia Tech stuff, they hit the mark and they go above and beyond for you. It's a Tech grad. It's a guy who is familiar with the Georgia Tech scene right there in the heart of Atlanta. So you support a local brand, but you're also hanging out with some great gear as well. And they just came out with these awesome shirts and hats as well. So as they kind of get ready, you see us a couple of the options there. You can get a jersey, you can get the Brent Key hoodie, the Tech Like Men, the North Avenue Trade School, and some great cold weather gear there as well. But as you can see, I'm rocking the Georgia Tech, the jacket script hat there as well, and we appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit though. Let's kind of dive into some content and different places, in terms of, I guess the best way to put it is in terms of what we have seen from this group over the spring. And I think that the first topic of conversation I want to start with is kind of talking about this secondary. And, you saw Saeed Gibbs enter the portal, and I think that, I'll get to that in a second, but I really believe the secondary has improved. And I think when you look at this, maybe the defensive back room as a whole, you're really kind of seeing a situation where the floor has been raised. Now, I will tell you this: how good is the prospects of this room? I don't know. Can it be a top 5 unit in terms of pass defense in the ACC? Maybe it can. What I do think is I think that we're seeing the floor being raised. Now, look, you lose obviously a guy like Lamiles Brooks to the draft. You've lost some pieces as well. Tay Seymour transfers to Auburn. So you lose some guys that have experience, right? You lose guys that you've kind of looked at over the past couple of years and you've said, hey, those are going to be the next in the wings. And also they kind of help now because they're playing right now. Seymour's a great example of that. But I think when you look at, retaining a guy like Amari Harvey, Rodney Shelley with another year in the system, Omar Daniels there, Clayton Powell-Lee, when you look at that foursome there, you really have to like the level of play that you have, and you pair that alongside some of the young guys you have in. And obviously, Christian Pritchett is a guy that I think a lot of people are really excited about, and talking with some people in and around the building. Him, Tay Harris, the true freshman, Dalen Pinson. You guys saw, we talked about Saeed Gibbs entering the portal. You have a group on the front side, like that starting 4 potentially, that can be something that's really impressive. And it can be something that allows you to transition some of these uber talented kids that you're able to get in the high school ranks. It allows you to move some of those players into roles, in developmental roles. They're not asked to play immediately. A great example of this, I would say, is a guy like Clayton Powell-Lee. Powell-Lee burst onto the scene in his freshman year, right? He had to play a massive role when Jalen King went down with injury, him and Lamiles Brooks on the back end of the defense. You hope you don't have to do that here in 2025. You don't have to have a scenario where you have to play, or your hand is forced to play. Now, there's 2 ways to look at it. Is your hand going to be forced to play a young guy because he's playing so well, or is his hand be forced because other things are not happening? You want to sit on kind of what I talked about, the former there, is you want to have a situation where if Tay Harris is balling out, then he's on the field because he's the best player there, not because some of the older guys aren't living up to it or you've had injuries there as well. So I thought that one of the big takeaways for the spring for me was that this secondary, the floor has been elevated. And I think that it's something that just in terms of the level of play and the level of consistency you need from that group, as you replace some pass rushers up front, you need some continuity on the back end of the defense. So secondary, I'm excited about. I think it's the job that Peoples has done there, the job that obviously Gideon and getting in there and doing what he wants to do defensively, too. It has all the makings to be a pretty solid unit, both young and old, there on the back end of the defense. The second takeaway I'm rolling with from spring game is the running back room depth. Look, we all saw the news. Anthony Carey entered the transfer portal, right? Carey enters the portal. He's gone. And a lot of people are like, hey, this is a kid who, this time last year, highly rated kid. You won the battle against Texas A&M to get him to commit to Georgia Tech. Norvell McKenzie was really excited to get a guy like this. What's happened? Well, one, you've retained Jamal Haynes up until this point. Top 3 back in the conference, probably top 10 back in the country. You've retained Jamal Haynes in terms of that. Now, what you're trying to sit here and tell me and do is essentially, where did Carey fall in the pecking order? Well, he was passed over. When you look at this running back room, folks, you have Haynes, you have Hosley, and you obviously, you have other names there as well that they're excited about being able to utilize. So the running back room depth for me is envious, and I think it's a key talking point coming out of the spring is that you've got guys that can contribute now, and you need that. This team is going to be very, very dependent on what Haynes King and Jamal Haynes can do. Those are your drivers. Those are your fire starters in terms of what you want for this offense. You have to keep them healthy over the course of the season, meaning you have to have other guys that you can delegate to. If this running back room depth is indicative, and one of the things that showed us that was Carey leaving the portal, who I think is a talented young back and obviously can get, a fresh start somewhere else. But if you're able to kind of turn the page and say, okay, we can go here, we can go there, we can use Hosley here, we can use Jamal Haynes here. There's other names. Trelane Maddox looks like a guy that is, really coming off that injury, the physical presence back that you want to complement Jamal Haynes. Dalen Gordon is another name that has just kind of worked his right way into the rotation. All of these things, you're starting to name them, and you've got Carey down as the fifth, fifth running back. So if the depth is real here with what we think coming out of spring ball, then that's massive in terms of what you have going on for being able to rest Jamal Haynes, being able to have some versatility in your play calling, being able to utilize guys in different packages. It doesn't have to be number 11 out there constantly. And that's a big talking point. I think, coming into 2025, you have everything in front of you. You have a good shot to make it to Charlotte if things bounce your way and you execute correctly. And one of those things has to be is this running back room depth has to be something that really hits. And so out of the spring, I like where it sits, and I think it pairs well with obviously Haynes King and his running ability too, right? You want bottom line, you just want this room to be able to complement what your star players can do. I don't think it was necessarily there last year for them. They didn't have that big bruiser of a back that could do that. This year, I think that they have that. So that to me is why one thing I love about the spring game, kind of the takeaway, is the running back room to me is solid, and then obviously the secondary. Now, if you tuned in and you see the title of this video, you obviously know that we're kind of talking about the defense. Defensive improvement is paramount if this team is going to make a run to Charlotte. And look, it's funny to me, but the defensive importance, maybe this is not the correct terminology to use this, but the importance of this defense making a step and taking the next step under Gideon and under the tutelage of a lot of the coaches on this defensive staff, and you can name every single one of them. The position groups need to get better, and it needs to create an 11-man unit. And then obviously you've got subs, but an 11-man unit that is usable in terms of big game atmosphere, can go get you stops and stuff like that. You have to have that. I leave spring talking with people, and the thought process is, and I told you one of my big takeaways from the spring was the secondary, the floor has improved. You feel like you have a better floor in terms of the secondary grouping. Let's move down to the linebackers. We talked about secondary. Let's talk about the linebacker position. Everything coming out of spring camp is that Taj Butler is looking like an animal out there. He looks like a guy that we know he can play sideline to sideline. I watched him in high school down here in the New Orleans area. This is a kid who really, really can make an impact for you. He can really, really be a difference maker for you. And overall, when you look at that defense, You've got EJ Lightsey. You have Melvin Jordan. You've got Taj Butler. Kamen Spalding came in through the portal. And you still have Kyle Eford, who has been utilized, has to be utilized in the right way, and obviously needs to get healthy there as well with the injury he had towards the end of the year. So I think just in terms of this defense, you've got a great opportunity to get better. You got to understand, and Goldfellow says this right here, the fourth quarter meltdowns last year, you do have to figure out a way to avoid that, and that's closing out games, and I think that comes with more experience in playing in those types of atmospheres, and I mean, when I say atmospheres, like where you're leading at late in the game, and you got to be able to go get a stop to get off the field. But that linebacker position is going to be key. I have stood on the table multiple times and told you I think Taj Butler is one of the more naturally talented and gifted linebackers in that room. The reports coming out of spring ball would indicate that he has been that guy, and if that comes to fruition, I will tell you this. If Taj Butler emerges, that's going to be one of the steals out of that class in terms of getting a guy from down in Louisiana who I can tell you firsthand LSU really, really liked. They were kind of concerned, and they missed their window to go get him. Georgia Tech has a potential diamond in the rough in their hands in Taj Butler. I love what he brings to the table. So if you can go get that guy who has great sideline-to-sideline speed, can make really good hits, and if he's feeling more comfortable in reading an offense, understanding what the offense line is trying to do in terms of combo blocking. Hey, they're blocking down. I got to get out here. Hey, I might have to play some outside leverage. Stuff like that. That where in high school maybe he was able to run around and make plays because he's so athletically gifted. That's a massive development piece for this. So that's the linebacking core. We've talked secondary. We've talked about the linebacking core there as well. And I mean, I think you have a solid group. I'm excited to see what Lightsey can do there as well. Here's kind of where I think a lot of people, and rightfully so, a lot of people are kind of nervous, I would say, about the front seven. And if you were honest with them, and if you're really going to be real about this, the one concern defensively, I think, is you feel good about secondary linebacker. You got some guys. Is probably the lack of interior defensive line presence. Yes, you bring back Jordan Vandenberg, who was a massive hit for you there in terms of what he brought to the table from Penn State. Very physical, a lunch pail type mentality, like a guy that just goes to work, very much fits the mentality that Brent Key wants in this team. And he does a good job of that. I think he was way more disruptive towards the end of the year last year. I think that he was way more physical than maybe even the media thought he was going to be. He is strong, and he plays like he's strong. He doesn't play scared, anything like that. You have that penciled in at one defensive tackle spot. Okay, so we know that that's fine. When you kind of look at elsewhere you're going, you obviously have Matthew Alexander, the transfer from Central Florida from Buford, hasn't put up a lot of stats, had 17 tackles last year, but 6'3", around 290 to 300 pounds. That to me is where you kind of look and say, okay, does he develop there as well? Other names, you have obviously Shameik Jones, you have Jason Moore. I think that in terms of the interior defensive line, that's where for me it's like, okay, do you have the guy? Because like last year, you had a guy in Thomas Gore who, look, I think that the casual Georgia Tech fan or the casual college football fan would have known in the impact that Gore had. But Gore was a veteran player who had been there and done that. And I think if you look towards the portal, we'll get to the portal here in a second. If you look towards what could maybe happen, you would love to add like a plug and play type of player along that front seven in the interior of the defensive line. I think it would shore up a lot of the concerns that you have, and as well as the growth that you hope to see from the edge rushers there as well. So you have some pieces. I don't think you have a game wrecker in terms of that. And look, very few teams do have a game wrecker there. But I think it's also important to state and understand that those cost a lot of money in the portal, and you're going to have to do some internal development. So does someone develop alongside Jordan Vandenberg to be able to have a disruptive interior front? That's one of the questions leading out of spring for me that I have about this. Let's talk edge rushers and defensive ends here for just a second, because I kind of have a double connection with this guy in terms of this. Braden Manley has looked very, very promising in terms of what he brings to the table. Was talking with some folks over at Mercer about him, and they said, look, that's the kind of guy that the numbers don't lie. Like, unless something's crazy or there's a scheme, weirdness there, it doesn't fit, he's going to produce. And then obviously the reports coming out of Georgia Tech spring camp where that Braden Manley was a guy that they really liked. They liked what he brought to the table. So you hope that transfers and you can get a pass rush off the edge from him. Ronald Triplett, I would kind of identify him to me as just a high floor, I don't know the ceiling type of player. And that honestly, for a couple of these guys, that might be the scouting report or the synopsis on what you're seeing out of this. Manley, we don't really know like what he's going to be able to do in the ACC. Ronald Triplett, I think that he's a guy that's not going to make a ton of mistakes and play solid for you. You're probably going to need him for some outside contain there as well. AJ Hoffler, the transfer from Clemson. You know, what is his upside? Very, very good athlete. Didn't pan out in Clemson. Comes back home to Atlanta. Can you get something out of him that Clemson wasn't able to get out of? That's kind of going to be up to that front seven in terms of the coaching staff and how they want to align him with that. So, you know, you kind of talk also Jordan Boyd. I think a lot of people are really excited to see, and me too, kind of what Amontre Bradford can bring to the table. And then obviously Christian Garrett, you know, the kind of one of the prize jewels of that 2025 class of what you were able to bring into campus. What does he bring to the table? So there's promise on this front seven in terms of defensive importance. What I do worry about is you're relying on a lot of things to pan out. And look, in college football nowadays, there's not a lot of certainties. There's not a lot of things that you're like, okay, this is definitely going to happen. What I will say to that point, though, is there's an opportunity, and it kind of parlays us into the spring portal aspect, that there's an opportunity to maybe find a player or two that gives you a high floor, and it maybe raises the floor. Because the potential for the amount of turnover you've had on the front seven, it's hard to pinpoint that what it's going to be for anybody. But I think they like what they have there, and in terms, like I said, I think you could benefit from maybe adding an interior defensive lineman if you could. One more note going back to the secondary room. A lot of people saw Saeed Gibbs enter the transfer portal, you know, and obviously, you know, you have a guy who was in Rhode Island, transferred for 1 year, and you know what's the deal with that? Look, Kelvin Hill has been a guy as advertised, I think, so far, and that's a guy that they really, really like. Could maybe slot in, you know, as the opposite starting cornerback, opposite of Amari Harvey, to where you could really, and I'll kind of say this, you could really have a starting, let's just call it five. Let's say they roll five defensive backs out of there. And if you want to learn more about what this defensive format could look like, go check out an earlier video when we talk about Gideon and what he would run at Georgia Tech and what his experience running stuff is. You could have Kelvin Hill and Amari Harvey at the cornerback spots. You could have Rodney Shelley roaming around in the nickel, which I think allows him to be a playmaker. You have Powell Lee and Omar Daniels at the safety spot. What does that give behind you? Well, probably for the first time in a while, you have real safety depth. And the fact that you have Tay Harris, who's immensely talented, you just have to wonder what's going to jump from Cedartown to Georgia Tech. How wide is that gap? Right? That's going to be the biggest question with him. And then you have Christian Pritchett, another kid from Louisiana we talked about earlier, who good reviews coming out of spring ball, entering his second year. Maybe he feels more comfortable. So I think you have real safety depth in terms of a real 2D that you could feel comfortable with. It's just, I think you're replacing a high floor player, and you're having to do that in Warren Burrell. I liked what Burrell, brought there. So I don't know. It's interesting to me in terms of that. Andy says, who are the four losses? I think he's referring to Ralph said 8-4. That was why. We'll take a post. We're gonna ramp up the content on Georgia Tech here. It's been a crazy past couple of weeks, and so we're gonna ramp it up. We might do some post spring evaluations. What's up, Clayton? Good to see you. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel there as well. Okay, let's talk about real quick the portal and some portal rumors. Tennessee fans are saying essentially, could Haynes King be a candidate to head to Knoxville? That would really, really surprise me. I think it really would. I want to get this one in perfect comment here. Meow. Coach said we're using most of our NIL defensively. I think that's probably the smart choice. Obviously they had the visitor today, and I wanted to go pull up his name to be able to get it in here. The offensive lineman that's going to be visiting, or is setting up a visit, I guess is the correct way to put it. Let's go find his name real quick. You had the time, obviously. Okay, so I've got it right here. JB Nelson, ex Penn State offensive lineman, 6'5", 325 pounds. He played in 27 games at Penn State the last 2 years. He did make 8 starts. So he's a guy with starting experience. He's expected to visit currently Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Maryland, and Syracuse. I and I know, Meow, we're going right here in terms of this. And we're going to star some things. See, Ralph, this is where we need you here. In terms of what you would want to add. So let's start here, Meow. I think that we talked about it earlier in the show. Interior defensive line is something you'd love to go add. I think the offensive line is going to be good, but if you've got a guy who, and if they really fall in love with JB Nelson on this visit at 6'5", 325, I mean, I wouldn't be against it. And I don't know how your feelings are on it there, Mr. Meow. I guess I'll call you that. But I don't know how your feelings on it, but I think to that point, if they're going to use most of the NIL defensively on the defensive side of the football, you'd have to be really particular about where you're going to go on the offensive side of things. And so I think that if you feel like you need to upgrade offensive line, you feel good at running back, receiver, tight ends, I think they're okay at tight end, to be honest with you. I just think that Jackson Halls is a tough guy to replace in what he brought. And I don't know if there's another Jackson Halls type of player that's going to give that to you right now. But in terms of this, I think that you're kind of sitting in a scenario where you want to go defensively. You want to be able to make a difference maker, because that's the side of the ball where if you really improve that, and I know, look, we've received some interesting comments about our anti-tech, whatever you want to call it. It is. I know Ralph and Will, we like to, really, I don't even say, maybe poke fun a little bit, but also we like to make people think about why they're saying what they're saying. I think that's the best way to put it. If this defense can improve enough, why can't they be a team that could challenge to go to the ACC title game? And if you get there, you might have a good shot of making the playoff. That sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it's like, I say this all the time. If you have Haynes King lining up at center, under center, not at center, that would not be a winning formula. And no offense to Haynes King, I just don't think that his ability to snap the ball and block would be all that much appreciated. But if you have that, you're going to have a chance in any game you play, right? And I think that's something to know. So to your point, using the defensive side of the football, if that improves, if you can find a way to have a top 40 unit, I'd put you in Charlotte. I think that you could do that. King would be the best center in the country. Maybe Damon Stoudemire can use him. I don't know. Can King hoop? Can Haynes King hoop? That's what we need to know. That's the stuff we need to figure out. I'm going to get to a couple more portal stuff here real quick, and then Ralph's in the background now. I started to start some questions there as well. We'll take some questions before we round it out here into the show. But going back to this, right? You have, I think, let's go back to it. You have a situation where could you add a defensive lineman? Yes, you probably would like to. Okay. Could you add a receiver? That's something for me, and I know some people in the Discord, make sure you join the Discord down below, talking Georgia Tech, college football all the time, year round. If the right receiver entered the portal, then maybe you go for him. And I think that's what to me I was saying is that they're going to be very particular. I think a lot of what they're going to be doing in the portal is guarding. You're going to have to roster retention. I mean, it's no secret. Like, Jamal Haynes is a commodity for some teams. Like, they would love to have him. You got to keep Jamal Haynes. He is, we talked about at the beginning of the show, linchpin of your offense, a guy that he's the fire starter. You need to get the fire going. I know Ralph doesn't believe in fire starters. He's a grown man. He does it himself. But when you believe in fire starters, I didn't even mean that in the arsonist type way. I just meant like starting the grill. Like, you don't want that. But I didn't put two and two together. Ralph's not an arsonist, by the way, for all the people at Believe Podcast Network. But in all seriousness, I don't know if that removes our Section 103. We're not arsonists, okay? So if you have Ralph is an arsonist, confirmed, TD Jake says. You're going to have to be particular. So I think the first and foremost is roster retention. If somebody comes in with an offer on Jamal Haynes, you have to match that, because you have to keep him in the fray. up to a certain point, right? We just saw Fran Brown let his receiver walk for what he reported to be around $2 million, is what it is. So roster retention is going to be the first part of the portal rumors, right? You have to keep guys there. Do I think Haynes King is leaving? No, I don't think Haynes King's leaving. I think, and me, Ralph, and Will talked about this kind of off air the other night, texting back and forth. Like, he is very much in his perfect situation. Also, what a comment. Ralph started the fire. Ralph started the fire. I listened to that song on the way back from spring ball today. So that's big right there. Receiver. Haynes would not succeed as much as anywhere but Tech right now. Yeah, I think he's in the perfect situation, to Ralph's point. I mean, also, we got to, there's so much stuff. I haven't talked about Georgia Tech in so long. I'm so amped up and hyped to do it. But I think that when you kind of look at what you have in that wide receiver room, you like it. Isaiah Canyon is a physical presence. You have to have a physical presence in this receiver room. Is it Isaiah Canyon? It's time to kind of figure out what he is in terms of another guy that I think you have to kind of figure out what he is and who he is, and who has had a good spring ball, right? A good spring ball. We've all heard this. We've all seen this. They've talked about it. It's Zion Taylor, real speedy guy. A lot of people have said, really, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, like, hey, if he develops from the high school ranks, that could be something really exciting to kind of watch. So you got Zion Taylor, you got Canyon, you got Stockton, all of these these redshirt sophomore guys. You're going to have freshman Jordan Allen, track star, really, really good player. We had him on the podcast earlier when he were committed. And then you have kind of your older guys. And so you have three phases of receivers. And we're going to do post-spring position breakdowns, especially once the portal kind of calms down here for a second. Malik Rutherford getting him back is huge. I think that's still going to be a retention aspect. There's going to be teams that try to go get him still. Dean Patterson, Eric Rivers. And look, I mean, we had Ralph and Gavin out at Auburn spring practice about a couple weeks ago and over the past couple weeks. And look, two guys that Tech had the chance to have on this 2025 roster are on Auburn's roster. And I think they would have been very, very key pieces. Eric Singleton Jr. and Sam Turner. Those are two guys that you'd like to have. Well, now you've got Dean Patterson and Eric Rivers. I think Patterson is a high floor. I don't know what maybe low ceiling type player. I think he's a solid player. The Eric Rivers conversation has been dominating a lot of people's message boards and discords or whatever you want to call it, because it's, can you replace what Eric Singleton did in this offense? And maybe that's what we need to have a conversation about, is the Eric Singleton at Auburn, I think, is going to be a totally different player than he was at Georgia Tech, because Georgia Tech, I'll just be real with you, I think Georgia Tech just wants to run the ball. I think they want to just be bruisers. I think they want to, run the ball, be physical. It is what it is. So all that to say is, does Eric Rivers have to be the player that Eric Singleton is? No, but you have to replace him, like our friend Will says all the time, in the aggregate. Shout out Moneyball, # not an ad. I don't know how you could have an ad for a movie, but is what it is. You got to replace him in the aggregate. So Eric Rivers, Dean Patterson, Malik Rutherford did that first three. You got Zion Taylor, Isaiah Canyon, Bailey Stockton, and then obviously Jordan Allen and a couple other guys as well. A guy that I'm looking forward to in terms of why I don't think you necessarily need to go, I wouldn't put it as a high priority in terms of going to get someone in the portal, is Luke Harpring. He is the type of tight end that OCs dream of. Very athletic. He can split out wide. I don't think he's ready to necessarily block against some of the physical teams you're going to play and maybe I'm wrong in this, and we'll see, obviously, when the season comes. Can he be counted as an inline blocker against Clemson, against that defensive front? I don't know. I don't know if he can. Georgia, can he be? I don't know. But in terms of the weapon he can be in the passing game, I think he's ready now. That's why you still have a guy like Brett Scyther on the roster. That's why you still obviously have, you got JT Byrne there as well. But replacing Jackson Halls is going to be tough. But as for the portal rumors, we saw, obviously, Matt Zennett's 24/7 Sports reported today there's going to be a potential for an O-line visitor to get onto campus. I think you add there if you need to. And whatever they have, the post-spring evaluations are some of those guys, you kind of see what it is there. You see what you have there. So I like where they're going. In terms of defense, it all comes down to interior defensive line. I mean, if there's a guy that you could just plug a hole, you need to go get that, because you got to be better against the run, especially in crunch time. Overall, you weren't terrible in 2024, but you need to be able to at least duplicate that. And I just think with losing Zeke Biggers and Thomas Gore, you have lost two veteran talents. You've got to figure out a way to replace that. So it'll be interesting. But hey, we appreciate you tuning in. Kind of a lunchtime edition episode of the show. It's it is what it is. But man, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hang out with us on social media. Make sure you join there as well. Goldville says Petty looks solid in the spring game, but definitely too small. I mean, look, the conversation around Josh Petty is ridiculous. I think at this point, in terms of where it is our Discord. I'm going to keep saying this. 24/7 rated him as highly as they did because of how he could project. He has the frame to be a borderline first round talent. Now, does that mean he's going to be a first round talent? No. But it tells you if he does the correct work and if he obviously gets in the weight room and adds the correct weight, not a bunch of blubber, correct physical weight. If he does that, that's wild, Ralph. If he does that, then yeah, that's how it projects. 5 stars are ranked, and I can't speak for any other service, but for 24/7, you have 32 5 stars. That represents, hey, we think these guys are the 32 guys that most likely to be a first round pick based off their size and projectability. Petty was near and around that conversation. I mean, that's it. That is what it is there. So we're going to get into some more content here in the next couple of weeks. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when the latest content falls. And we'll have to talk to you. Ralph Leary in the background. My name is Bryce Coon. Shout out Section 103. Make sure you check out some of these awesome hats. I love this one. This is a sick hat. Sick hat, little rope hat. They've got a white one. They've got a gold one. A ton of great merch over there. Tell them the Crowded Booth sent you. And we'll see you next time. We appreciate it. Here on Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Coon.